we also have to be honest with the truths that
Mm-hmm.
exist in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's pretty obvious in North America with the Black community is our distrust for corporate entities, for government
100%.
agencies, for the government. Yeah, so I
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And so, and then this that is true, but it's also true that there are ways and means in which you can identify an opportunity for a special project or a
Mm-hmm.
special organization within the Black community to help them move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the foundation of how this country was built, it was a combination and primarily support from corporate entities or from government entities. And so if we're trying to figure out how to elevate organizations or Black-led groups or Black-led projects, we really have to figure out how to navigate certain spaces.
Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and I am very excited about today's episode. I know I say this every single time, but the reality is I have a really amazing person joining me today. I'm joined by Hildah Jumah. Hildah is the executive director at the Black Talent Initiative, and I had the pleasure of hearing Hildah speak at the RBC Ignite event earlier this year. RBC is one of the major banks here in Canada. And at that event, it was a Money Moves event. And Hildah, I must say, I don't think there was a single person in that room that wasn't completely moved and just inspired by what you had to share with us that day, and myself included. So I knew that, I really wanted to have you here on the podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thank you
it.
so much, Stella, for having me. It's always great to have a space that's dedicated to Black women. And it's always inspiring to be in a space where you're safe and you can share your inspiration and your stories. And so it was really nice to connect with you. And I'm happy to be on here today. And I'm excited for our chat later. So thank you for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. Well, thanks again. So, Hilda, tell my listeners, for those who don't know, Black Talent Initiative, what is the organization all about and what's its mission?
So the BTI's mission is to be a bridge and a connector for Black talent in Canada.
Mhm.
And the way we see the role that we play in this space is amplifying Black talent, connecting them to whatever opportunities that they want to pursue. I think one of the misconceptions we do have and we have had in the Black community, and I think that that's changing, is
Mhm.
that we just need to get a job that fits the corporate world, work in a corporate tower somewhere in a
Mhm.
city somewhere and earn a living, get a mortgage, pay your car payments. And I think that a lot of Black people today really want more out of that, the life that they're living. They really want to thrive. And
Mhm.
so you'll find Black entrepreneurs, you'll find a lot of Black people pivoting into different careers, including tech. And
Mhm.
so the BTI sees themselves as amplifying that amazing journey that you want to go on and helping you open the doors, right?
Nice.
Not every Black person has a friend who, plays golf and can help them with the networking and the connections, but we see ourselves
Mhm.
as connecting with prospective sponsors, partners, mentors, coaches to really help Black talent in that journey, whatever that journey may be. And we see ourselves as being unapologetically Black in that mission, which means that whatever it is you imagine that you want to do, we want
Mhm.
to help you achieve that.
Nice.
Because for a long time, Black folks have been told that these are the careers or the jobs that they fit into, and that's not the case.
100%. I completely agree. And I mean, that even just speaks to my journey into tech, right? Tech for me was never something that I saw myself doing. It wasn't a space that I saw myself in because I didn't have other people around me that were in that space, right?
So true.
And
Yeah.
also, when I looked at people within tech, I was like, they don't look like me. So,
Yeah.
how do I then fit into the space where people do not look like me? And how do I carve my own way and kind of make my way in? So, I love that that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's impressive because what you're seeing now in tech, and you've probably experienced this, Stella, is representation is so important. And so having faces with like yours in tech is so key in opening the doors for other young girls or young Black people who want to get into tech.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I agree. Awesome. So, Hilda, tell me a little bit about your journey. What does that look like? I mean, now you're an executive director at BTI, which is amazing and incredible. But what does your journey look like? How'd you get there?
Well, a very full, energetic, fiery Hilda arrived in Canada in 2001.
Mhm.
I came in 2001 as an international student, and so I did my studies at York, pursued political science and philosophy. And what was interesting during that time was just the political landscape for me was being aware about the war in Iraq, why America had invaded Iraq, and then prior to that, there was the war in Afghanistan. And I became aware in a very political sense as to some of the consequences of what war does to marginalized communities. And so I finished my studies at York and I took on a certificate program at TMU, then Ryerson in nonprofit management. And that's, I'd say, where the light in my mind turned on because I met so many classmates working in the nonprofit field. And I started to get really excited about doing nonprofit work and participating in the nonprofit field. And then I started to realize that it's a career I could pursue. And so for me, I worked in the Canadian Federation of Students, which is a nonprofit, for 14 years. I started off as an intern. 14 years later, I was an executive director. And one of the things that was really important for me in that journey is advocating for other people and providing a platform and a voice to those people who typically wouldn't have that voice. And so that really deepened my passion for advocacy work. And so I was blessed in that journey. I had so many amazing mentors and coaches, and we did such great work. And I think what really sparked more inspiration in me is in 2019, I became a mom, and I became a mom to a Black kid. And I started to think of all the scary stories you hear of Black people trying to live in North America and Black boys trying to live in North America and, not having an idea of how you can control someone's destiny. But I knew that my calling in my career was to support my community, and by extension, provide a better world, perhaps, for kids like mine who are coming up in a world where anti Black racism, police brutality was really important to talk about. And, during my mat leave, I remember watching all these protests in 2020 about Black Lives Matter, learning the story of George Floyd, but also learning the story of so many other Black people who had lost their lives. And so I had a great opportunity to elevate my career with the BTI. I met amazing people during the interview process. I met one of our co-founders, Mark Harrison, who has been a great coach and a mentor. And I think that our conversation during that interview really solidified why I should be working in this space, working to support the Black community, working at BTI. And I really saw the vision of what BTI could be. And so, I don't know, 20 something years later in this country, I find myself here. And I think that um, the work that we do, the work that Black led organizations do, the work that Black small businesses do, we may not necessarily see it moving the needle, but it really does impact the community that we support. And so for me, anyone who's out there listening and does this kind of work, keep going, spread the word, look for ways to be supported. But we really need to keep these grassroots community-led organizations growing, specifically in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, what a powerful story. That's amazing. And I can only imagine, I mean, having a child of your own, how much that changes your worldview, right? Um, like you said, the Black Lives Matter. I feel like it changed a lot of people's view just on how we function in the society and how that equity portion is just it's so skewed, right?
Yeah,
People didn't really have an idea prior to that.
yeah.
I mean, as a Black woman, we live it every single day, right? We
Hmm.
see it. And
Hmm.
as a Black woman, I found like we're almost at the bottom of the totem pole, right?
Hmm.
When it comes to that portion. And yeah, I mean, it's incredible the work that you guys are doing. It really is. It really is.
Yeah,
And it's very
and
impactful.
thank you. And platforms like this and many others that provide a voice just amplifies the work that we do. I think that we
Hmm.
mustn't get tired talking about it, because I think
100%.
that if you think about trying to create a better world for the next generation and the generations to come,
Hmm.
you think about the giants on the shoulders of the giants that we're standing on, and some people lost their lives just trying to say that Black people's lives are important. So, if that's the bar, we need to just keep talking and keep plowing through and look for ways that allies and change makers can support us. So, yeah, for sure.
And speaking of that, equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's one of those things that we hear about it. It's like the new buzzword. Everyone talks about it. You walk into a corporate meeting, that's what people want to discuss. You're applying to jobs. That's almost I mean, in almost every application, I mean, every job listing, there's something about diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed that the diversity portion is there's a lot of effort put into making sure that you have the diversity hire. You're making sure that those people are making their way in through the door. But then the work after the fact is sort of lacking. What's your opinion on that and how can companies improve?
That is such a great question. And I think that one that is more prevalent now than before.
Hmm.
I think for a lot of organization, when we were chartering the course of trying to make better workplaces, I think the perception was this is just a strategy or a good to have mentality. But what is really lacking is a strategy that can lead into senior leadership having conversations about what is a 3-year plan, what is a 5-year plan. And what I've seen some organizations do this successfully is they have those strategy conversations. Then from the strategy conversations, they create a committee. From the committee, they create employee resource groups or service groups that are specific to each identity. From that, they hire and run a department, not an individual. Like, don't give me one person in charge of diversity at your company. Give me a department, give me a budget, autonomy to the leaders in that department to make the decisions that they can make. And then, go further and attach bonuses to DEI strategies and benchmarks, right? We know some of these companies have bonuses based on marketing and sales. Why not on DEI, right? And what we are seeing is that people have kind of plateaued in this journey, and are not really sure sometimes, or having the commitment on the willing um, to push this forward, especially from the senior leadership perspective. And so for me, it really has to be deeply rooted to the point where your employees see themselves reflected in the strategy, see themselves reflected in these committees, because you're right, Stella. We hire, we have the numbers, but 6, 8, 12 months later, are those people there? Are they moving? Do they have mentors? Do they have coaches? Do they have sponsors? Do they have support? You put a flashy announcement and say, we've hired this person as our DI lead. What kind of supports are you offering? What kind of budget have you allocated to that? So I think there's still a lot of consistency that's lacking in that direction. And it'd be good to see organizations really be serious about this, because I think, especially in Canada, in the next 20 years, the face of the population is going to change dramatically. The Black and Indigenous population is growing by a 50% rate, and are going to be the highest growing population in this country. So, how are you welcoming them into your workplaces? How is your workplace the workplace of choice, right? So show me your strategies. So show me your implementation procedures. Show me how your bonuses and your senior leadership is taking this seriously, and then I'll consider coming to work here. I think
Nice.
that's where we need to go, so that it hurts where they will make, I guess, changes into the organization.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that retention portion is so important, right? Getting someone in the door is one thing, but are they sticking around, like you said? I do find there's almost a revolving door at some companies because people are just in and out because they don't feel like they belong, or there is not that. They can see that there's a lack of effort there. It was more so, let's just put up this post. We need to have this DI page on our website because it makes us look good, but then the efforts kind of stop there. So I completely agree with you. I think that's really important. You
Yeah.
have to put a little bit more effort there. So I want to say one thing I noticed about your LinkedIn page when I was looking is that you're one of the few people that have an actual land acknowledgement or just an acknowledgement to the place in which you work. How do you find for other companies, one thing that I noticed that, of course, they have these statements in terms of truth and reconciliation and the efforts that they're trying to put forth. But how do you think that they can contribute to that portion? And especially when it comes to Black and Indigenous communities, what type of efforts do you want to see from corporations?
I think it starts with all of us recognizing that we all have a role to play in personally educating ourselves and learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that starts from us recognizing that the truths, quote unquote, that we know of Canada are not really the truths of the Indigenous people of this country. And once you start to unlearn and relearn ways in which this country was created, how it was created, and recognize that when someone says that a territory is unceded or colonized, it means violence, death, and erasure of one community by another. It's not an easy truth, but it is the truth. And I think that we quickly always rush to reconciliation or reconciliation in the truth and reconciliation process. And a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals, there's a lot of guilt associated with recognizing the truth in this country. So for me, as an immigrant coming here, honestly, I had the wrong perception of what Canada is. I was like, Canada is a peacekeeping country, multicultural, yada yada yada, and learning all these things and unlearning the truths behind everything, and then now saying, okay, I am going to put myself in a place where I'm going to learn. I am going to be okay with how it feels to learn this, appreciate the direction in which the Indigenous people would like this history to be rewritten, because it's not my history, it's the history of the Indigenous people. And then put yourself in a space where you ask yourself, personally, what's my contribution? Secondly, what is the contribution of the organization I'm associated with? Thirdly, how am I collaborating with communities that are Indigenous communities in the areas or territories that I reside in? And so when you look at my land recognition statement in my LinkedIn, it only not only recognizes Indigenous people, but also, there was the transatlantic slavery that happened, that saw a lot of Black bodies like yours and mine brought unwillingly to this country. And then finally, this country was built on the backs of so many immigrants and continues to be the continues to be that way. And so you can imagine the foundation of this country is rotten, if I may use those words, because We colonized, we brutalized, we erased, we even used residential schools. We did the 60s scoop. And here we are in a situation where immigrants are coming into this country embedded on that history and not reflecting on the truth and reconciliation of that. I think that, first of all, Black and Indigenous communities need to be in solidarity with each other. We need to understand the truths and we need to work with each other. We need to learn each other's histories. We need to amplify each other's work. And then, secondly, we need to provide a space where we can advocate for each other and stand alongside each other in trying to figure out what truth and reconciliation can look like. Because for us, if we're the fastest growing generation populations in this country, there are going to be generations of Indigenous and Black kids who have no idea some of the truths that need to be uncovered, right? And the trauma that comes with that. So I think that for me, I think policy is good, legislation changes are good. And then at the organization level, what strategies are you using? How are you educating and unlearning some of these things and not just waiting for September 30th
Exactly.
or Black History Month to
Yeah.
learn things or unlearn things. Like let's do it every quarter, right?
Yeah.
You have sales meetings and quarter meetings every quarter. Why can't we do this every quarter? And that's the role
Yeah.
that DI officers and DEI executives can do and senior leadership can really do.
Nice. And I completely agree with you. I think it's everyone's responsibility, right? Even beyond the corporate level, how do we as individuals take the time to learn about the history of this country? Like you said, I myself am an immigrant and my, I mean, I was floored when I first found out about Canada's history, right? Because
Mhm.
it's one of those things that no one talks about. When I
Yeah.
was in elementary school, when I was in high school, it was never discussed. We maybe had one or two things in regards to the Indigenous folks of Canada, but apart from that, I mean, they never really taught us anything, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much that we can also do just on an individual level to teach
Mhm.
ourselves, teach our families. But like you said, that advocacy, right? How
Yeah.
are we advocating for each other?
Mhm.
How are we stepping into other people's community and ensuring that we're stepping in there with respect and with the
Yeah.
right intention and with the intention to learn as well?
Yeah.
So I completely
100%.
agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
for
sharing.
sure.
So I'm curious, for someone that is entering into the tech space, what are some things that they should be looking for in an organization when it comes to, I mean, as a person of color, if they're moving into this space, in your opinion, what are some things that they should be looking for in organizations?
That's an amazing question. And I think where we are at in 2023, social media, the internet is just your friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's so impressive and amazing to see all these Black-led organizations in the tech space. Like
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago, BPTN didn't exist, Afrotech didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like there was no representation of Black people in tech from even an individual perspective or even from an organization perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This week, I'm attending the BPTN Be Future conference.
Yes. Yes.
And, you know, I was just thinking about it the other day and I'm like, I feel like it's Afrotech North, right? It's like
Yes.
Canada has carved its space to say, hey, we are here.
Mm-hmm.
We are amazing. We
Yes.
don't necessarily require the validation of you to get hired. We have the skills, we have the transferable skills,
Yeah.
we have the intellect, and we bring diversity into the workplace. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, a lot of the people who I mentor, I always tell them about opportunities to transition into tech. So there's this organization called Skill Hat. It's
Okay.
started by some guy called Mo, and essentially it is an organization that helps people transition into tech. You do evening classes, you do expedited classes, you are in a cohort with racialized people, with Black people. And if you're part of that network, you're able to have the confidence to apply for jobs. And a lot of the testimonials I see online from him are people who had minimum paying jobs to tripling their salaries and having a better life, right? There's Jermaine Murray, who is the job father, whose basic role
Yeah.
is to help Black folk get into tech? Like, tell me this existed 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah,
right?
it did not.
And then when you look at the future, Obsidi is the community that comes out of BPTN. You
Mm-hmm.
can put your profile there once you're ready, and there are hundreds and hundreds of jobs that are posted on that network
Yeah.
for tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the choice is yours. It's like, which tech company do you want to go for? Do you want to go for a tech
Exactly.
giant, or do you want to go for a small shop? Do you want to work in
Mm-hmm.
an office? Do you want to work
Yeah.
virtually? And I
Mm-hmm.
think what people are also looking at when they are transitioning to tech as Black folk is, first, economic stability is important. Let's not kid
100%.
ourselves, right?
100%.
People are talking about generational wealth. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I just need to pay my mortgage or my rent because
Exactly.
inflation is a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part is, I'm looking for psychological safety in the workplace,
Yeah.
right? So if I see other people like me in tech, I'll feel safe. If I
Mm-hmm.
see policies or strategies within companies that are safe for me to work there, then I'll transition into tech. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
we are such amazing human beings as Black folk. We're so resilient. We're so full and vibrant of culture and energy that we're now going to change the tech space, right? And we're going to be innovators, and we're going to build generational wealth, and we're going to thrive. I dare anyone to
Amen.
stop Black people, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah. So I'm excited for the future of Black people in tech for sure.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I'll definitely be seeing you this week because I'll be at Be
Yes.
Future as well, of
Yeah.
course. Have you attended in the past?
Yeah, I
Okay.
attended, my first time was last year when it
Okay,
was
nice.
on Queen Street. Yeah, I'm super
Okay.
excited. And like,
Yes.
think of all the small organizations that help like young Black boys and girls code. Like,
Yeah.
that's also another thing where will be meeting so many people who are just being change makers and innovators in the space in a way
Yeah.
that we're kind of staking our claim in the tech industry, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really, we are. And yeah, there's so many, it's like you mentioned a few, there's so many credible organizations out there that are doing a lot for the Black community within the tech space. And BPTN is definitely one of them. Season one of this podcast had some incredible success stories of an individual that had joined the BPTN cohort. He was a recent immigrant from Nigeria, and within 3 months, he was making six figures. He's a full stack developer working with one of the largest banks in Canada. And I mean, these are the stories that come out of organizations like these, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to be there this week. I think we're going to have
Yeah.
an incredible time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think impact is so big for us in the tech space,
Mm-hmm.
and networking and feeling that energy is why we are all excited for BBTN's conference, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey and with the work that you're currently doing now. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you guys are facing?
So here's the thing. A lot of charities and nonprofits did pop up post 2020 that are
Mm-hmm.
Black led, Black servicing, and Black focused, and some got a renewed energy from that space.
Mm.
I think there's so many myths that exist in this space. First of all, one of the things that I think is a big myth is that there's not enough funding or money for to support all these kinds of Black led organizations. I think that that's not the case. There's enough money to do different things with different people. I was having a conversation last week with someone, and they were asking me, "Oh, who is BTI's biggest competitor?" And I said, "In the Black space, I'm not going to see anyone as a competitor. We're all like all of us want the same things."
At the
Um,
same time.
Exactly. We can always thrive at the same time. I think I'm going to
Yes.
use that.
Yeah.
And just thinking about how we're doing different things for different aspects of our community because we're not a monolith. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a competition. There should be enough money to fund different charities, different nonprofit groups, different grassroots organizations that are supporting people, irregardless of age, irregardless of immigration status. So for me, it's like that's the myth that really sometimes keeps me up at night, because a lot of the world in which I um, engage with assumes that that's the case, that, we only have a small pool of money. We've already committed to this Black organization, so we can't commit to that Black organization. So I'm really hoping that people start to unlearn and learn better truths about what the Black community is, who we are, how we function, how we are different and the same, but we are unique, and that an organization here is not the same as an organization elsewhere. They're all different and they're all doing the same amazing things or different things. But we really want the best for the Black community. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I think the second thing, when it comes to the space that I operate in, a lot of people in the Black community don't think of nonprofit or charitable work as a future career. And it's, I don't think it's a fault of anyone. I think that, whatever happens in the household and when we are younger, we're pushed in one way or another. But for me, it was interesting understanding that the nonprofit industry exists, and it could be an alternative as an employment alternative for me. And it could be a comfortable life for me and my family. I think that that is also one way in which we do not talk about it enough in the Black community. Like for me, I have worked 90% of my life in the nonprofit sector. I love it because there's something about doing inspiring and passionate work that keeps you going in a way that sometimes you may not feel that spark in the corporate world. So I think it's an employment opportunity for a lot of Black folk, and we bring amazing, innovative ways in which this industry can be revitalized. And I think that there's space for everyone who is interested. So for me, those are the two main things I would think about in terms of like the nonprofit world, the advocacy world.
Thanks for sharing. And I think that's important too for my listeners to hear that. Because a lot of times, the first thought is somewhere corporate, not necessarily working for a nonprofit. So I think that's really important to hear as well. Because even in the tech space, there's tons of opportunities there as well. So to not just limit yourself to one sort of train of thought, so to speak. And another thing that you touched on earlier, that kind of reminded me of something that I saw today. I saw an advertisement for a grant, and I was reading the comment section as I always do when it comes to social media, because I find I get more information from the comment section than I do from the post itself. And it
Right.
was interesting. It was like I forget the amount, but I think it was like 50,000 or something, and I believe it was a government grant. And the comments were almost disheartening, where a lot of people were saying, there's not enough opportunity, no one's going to get the grant, this is not true, yada yada yada, things like that. And I find that to be kind of sad that a lot of people do not see the opportunities that are out there, especially for the Black community.
Yeah.
And the fact that there is a ton of effort from different organizations, from the government, and it may not always look exactly how we want it to look. But the
Hmm.
reality is that these opportunities are out there. So it
Hmm.
almost felt like people were overlooking or not even taking the chance to even send in an application because they already
Yeah.
had their preconceived notions of what
Yeah.
this was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
saying that, it doesn't matter, you're not even going to get approved, don't even bother, we want to see the results, we want to see who got the grant, etc. When they're in the reality, I mean, I did a Google search myself for 2022 and I was able to
Hmm.
see the corporations that were awarded that grant, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, I mean, it's kind of similar to what you were speaking in terms of earlier, except for this was on a more like business and personal level.
Yeah.
But I do definitely think that, take the time out to do the research
Yeah.
and really dig a little bit deeper when it comes to these things, because there are a ton of opportunities out there. There are organizations like BTI that are putting in the work in order to ensure that we have a more equitable environment, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah,
just want to
and
share that,
maybe even
please.
just to add from that, there's,
Mm-hmm.
we also have to be honest with the truths that
Mm-hmm.
exist in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's pretty obvious in North America with the Black community is our distrust for corporate entities, for government
100%.
agencies, for the government. Yeah, so I
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And so, and then this that is true, but it's also true that there are ways and means in which you can identify an opportunity for a special project or a
Mm-hmm.
special organization within the Black community to help them move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the foundation of how this country was built, it was a combination and primarily support from corporate entities or from government entities. And so if we're trying to figure out how to elevate organizations or Black-led groups or Black-led projects, we really have to figure out how to navigate certain spaces. The more of us who navigate certain spaces, the more we can make the processes and procedures of how to get that grant and funding better. Because if there are 100 Black groups that apply for a fund or a grant, like you have mentioned, the one you're talking about, we're able to identify some of the roadblocks or challenges in that process and call that grant out or call that grantee out and say, hey, this needs to change. And so if we do not expose ourselves to certain opportunities, we're not going to know what exists, we're not going to know how to change them, and we're not going to advocate for them to be changed. So it's status quo. Unfortunately, that's just the reality that we live in. So if you want to change status quo, you have to go against the grain and see what's out there and take those chances, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. 100%. So, with your journey, I want to go back to that. If there's anything that you could do differently, I mean, you've had a pretty incredible journey, and I feel like everything that you've done up until this point has led you to this very moment. So, but if you're just looking back, is there anything you wish you had looked a little bit further into or maybe strayed away from? Is there anything that you'd do differently?
I think I would have made the decision to join the nonprofit world sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of the listeners here can understand a Black girl from Kenya wanting to be a lawyer and doing everything possible to be a lawyer and realizing that's not the career path for them. But
Yeah.
because it was so ingrained in me that either you went to do sports or you went to do specific professional careers, those are the only two fields I thought that were viable for me to chase. And I feel like I learned a lot through the journey, but I wish I would have pitched my tent somewhere else sooner so that I would have made bigger impact or deeper impact, or even just influenced people who look like me sooner. And so for me, it's always like, I know I have a voice. I know my role in my community. And so I will continue to advocate for that and continue to build leadership because I think that, I'm not the smartest or the best, but I think that we can start to create a generation of Stellas and Hildas who can be taking over from us and kind of like, that torch that you pass over.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I wish I pitched my tent sooner. I wish I'd had deeper impact to so many other Black people that I met sooner, so that they could have that power to imagine the unimaginable and go for it. So I don't think it's a
Fair
regret, but
enough.
I think
Yeah.
that if I was like writing a letter to my 20-year-old self, that would be the letter I would
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get into the nonprofit sooner.
Yeah. Just go for
That's
it.
it.
Don't be
That
afraid.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. Do it scared. That's
Yeah.
one thing me and my friends always say, just do it scared. The
Yeah.
reality is you've had such a huge impact, and I know you do, on everyone that you encounter. So I'm super grateful to have you here. But I agree, there's always one of those things. If you could have touched one more person a little bit sooner, what would that look like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so no
Yeah.
worries.
And don't get me wrong, it's good to have Black lawyers, Black
Mm-hmm.
doctors,
Of
and Black
course.
people in the nonprofit world,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's exactly it. So tell me a little bit about your personal life. And so outside of your career, how do you balance your personal life and what does that look like?
Okay, so that's a great question. Um, my husband makes fun of me because I have had the same five friends for 20 years.
Isn't that a great thing? I
Like,
mean,
I
that's
don't
like
have
a
more friends.
blessing.
Like, it's not growing, it's just the
Okay.
same.
That's
So
okay.
I think for me, I'm really rooted in, connecting with my friends. Uh,
Beautiful.
two of them live in the States, two of them live in Kenya, and
Mm-hmm.
then one of them lives in Canada here. And
Yeah.
for me, we just talk about life and connect about life. And these are people who have known me before I was ever an executive director, before I was ever a mother. And so they keep me humble and grounded, which I think, humility is really important. And feeling grounded in something is important. I'm super, super close with my family. People make fun of me, people who know me. I talk to my mom every day. My mom is in Kenya, but I talk to her every day. Um, and so I travel to Kenya every year. And I really, really feel like with a 4-year-old in your household, you really have to master what work-life balance is. So I know when to log off. Know when to lean into family time, lean into time and support him and be there for him because I think that that also fills me up. Yeah, and I spend a lot of time reading books. I spend a lot of time listening to music. And for me, reading books puts me in a space where nothing matters. And listening to music puts me in a place where I can dream and dream big. So those two worlds exist in my mind, and I'm a huge fan of 90s hip hop and R&B, and I try I try to learn other genres of music and I can't. But
Yeah.
there's just something about nostalgic music that just keeps you going. So,
Yeah, of course.
you know, yeah. So those are the
Nice.
things that I like, and I have really uh, found the importance of, if I'm not able to do it, I won't do it.
Good.
Like
Good. That's really
saying
healthy.
no. Like,
That's really
wow.
healthy.
Like
Yeah.
that has saved my 2023. Saying
Oh,
no.
nice.
I can't do this. I don't have the capacity. Can we share this workload?
Yeah.
You know,
Good
I
for
can't
you.
clean the house this week. I just can't.
Yeah.
Like, and being okay with it, because there's a level of
Mm-hmm.
guilt that comes with being a woman, that comes with
Mm-hmm.
being a Black mom.
Yep.
So just trying to make sure that I live in my truth.
Good for
Um,
you.
and I always tell people that kind of make your own rules and live by them. Don't live with whatever standards or transactional, traditional ways in which are not helpful and beneficial for you,
I
right?
agree.
And I
Mm-hmm.
started therapy this year, something that I didn't think was for me, or traditionally was for someone like me. And I've seen the benefits of how that has helped me, because now I have tangible tools to deal with certain aspects of my life that I've kept hidden from myself, right? So just find what works for you, balance it out, say no when you can, celebrate when you can, and when things are tough, lean on people. Like, we gotta get through this life, and we gotta find a formula that works for us. So that works for me.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. You
Yeah, for
touched on
sure.
my two favorite things. Well, three, I should say. Work-life balance, first and foremost. Therapy is big. I'm a big advocate for therapy. But also, like you said, finding your tribe as well, right?
Mhm,
And know
mhm.
that there's other people that you can lean on. You
Yeah,
don't have to do it all on your own. Learn how to say no. I think that's so important.
yeah,
When it comes to, even with this podcast, I was asked a lot, like, why are you separating it off into seasons? Why are you doing this? And I said, it's important because I don't want to burn out. I don't want it to just, I want to bring value each and every single time that I show up. So
yeah.
I think that's the perfect note to end this on.
Oh,
But
amazing.
before we leave, I
Yeah,
want to ask you, when it comes
yes.
to books, because I know you said you're a big reader, if you could recommend one book to my listeners, what would that be?
Okay, I cannot recommend one book
Okay.
because I read like 3 or 4 books at the same time.
Okay, I love it.
So
Yes.
my older sister
Mm-hmm.
got me into fiction.
Okay.
And so every year, our favorite author, John Grisham, produces a book.
Yes.
And so my Christmas reading book is always John Grisham, always.
Nice.
But I have found so many amazing Black authors and so much Black literature
Mm-hmm.
that I'm still trying to find my way. When it comes to Black authors and Black literature, I started by reading biographies and memoirs of Black people to get inspiration. So I read like Nelson Mandela, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. And
Yeah.
now I'm in a place where I want to read more of something that I recently discovered, which is like Black revolutionary theory.
Okay.
So think Wakanda, think
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther, but in a theory form. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, one of the things I keeps me up at night is how can Black people thrive in a world like this that is full of like colonialism, imperialism, sexism? And I'm like, maybe we should create our alternate world where none of this stuff exists. And so there's a theory behind that I read
Yeah.
that just like it gets you pumped, but it also gets you sad at the same time because you're still back in this world. So I don't have one book, but
Okay, well, that's
yeah,
so fun. See,
yeah,
I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and I'm so deep in the self-help, I need to start reading more fiction.
yes,
Every time we recommend a book to each other, we're like, okay, but that's still self-help. We're like, we need something else. We're
yeah,
joining a book club in January, so we'll
yeah,
see what we end up
yeah,
reading.
yeah.
But I'm definitely, yeah, I'm very intrigued, so I'll also look into
Yeah,
that.
you folks should, to make it easier, try with like a black romance kind of reading that's just
Yes.
like fun,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like centered around black folk, and then
Yeah.
that will get you excited for something else. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Start venturing
yeah,
off.
yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Hilda. It was so nice having you on the podcast. I'm so excited with all the work that you're doing with BTI, and I look forward to seeing you more in the future. And with that, everyone, my name is Stella. As always, thank you for listening to the Technically Yes podcast, and I look forward to speaking with you guys more next week. Thank you so much, Hilda.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. If you like today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod, and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically Yes podcast. Thanks again, and chat to you guys next week.